Over the years, ghosts and other supernatural entities have wormed their way into the mainstream media. They have become idolized and sought after by people willing to experience something not many others have. Some people tend to think that ghosts are just floating white blobs that simply shout trick or treat on Halloween. But others who know better realize that there are more to these tormented spirits than meets the eye. Ghosts would hardly be as well known if not for the locations in which they inhabit. And while the world is a gigantic graveyard, I'll be focusing solely on the US in this video. Before I begin, I wanted to note that I have made a previous video mentioning some of the more well-known locations in the US, so I'm going to try and refrain from including those locations a second time. Here are 7 of the most haunted locations in the United States. Constructed in 1885, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was designed to house 250 residents. By the 1950s, however, that number had jumped to well over 2,000. In an effort to stem the overcrowding, the West Virginia lobotomy project was enacted. The brutal procedures did little to cure the madness, however, as disconnection and violence ran rampant throughout the asylum. It wasn't until the 1980s the hospital finally saw a reduction in population, as changes in the treatment of mental illness were shifting. With the construction of a new facility, the old asylum shut its doors in 1994. After a decade of lying in wait, it had been purchased in the mid-2000s and reopened for historic and paranormal tours. As a central location for vicious medical practices and unsavory living conditions, it's no wonder this place has become known for its large paranormal activity. This list couldn't have been made without making mention of the most haunted city in America. New Orleans, just on its own, is home to some of the most intense spiritual activity in the world. It's probably due to the yellow fever epidemic that ran rampant throughout the city for nearly a century. In 1853, nearly 8,000 deaths were reported. In 1858, another 5,000. And 1878, another 4,000. Between 1817 and 1905, 41,000 people would lose their lives to this illness. Thankfully, scientists managed to halt the mosquito-borne illness by controlling the breeding conditions of the insects. However, such a tremendous loss of life is more than enough to skyrocket the appearance of apparitions. Next time you're in town, keep your eyes open, and you might very well see a spirit wandering around your hotel room. In 1822, the US Navy surveyed sites to determine a good location to stage guns in an effort to control the harbor in Key West, Florida. After drafting the plans to construct this new fort, the high costs caused a revision in design. The fort had been split into 2 batteries, the East and West Martello Towers. While they were never armed and never saw a battle, they had been used by the military for logistics right up until after World War II. They eventually became historic sites, and the East Tower had been turned into a museum. While many military locations are haunted due to the horrors of battle, this place is haunted for what it houses within its walls. The East Martello Museum is home to a little doll by the name of Robert. While I'm sure many of you are aware of who Robert is, for those of you who don't, Robert the doll is basically the first haunted doll. The doll which all other scary dolls get their inspirations from. According to legend, the doll had been owned by a painter in 1904. It had supernatural abilities that allowed it to move of its own free will. The owner would often be accused of mischievous actions and would try to convince his family that the doll was responsible. According to local folklore, the doll has caused numerous misfortunes towards those who visited Robert in the museum, especially those that take his photo without asking him for permission first. Apart from a minor period as a warship in World War II, the Queen Mary served primarily as a luxury ocean liner from 1936 to 1967. During that time, it was the site of at least one murder, a sailor being crushed to death by a door in the engine room, and children drowning in the pool. The city of Long Beach, where the ship resides, has since purchased the ship and turned it into a hotel, and it still serves that purpose to this day. Reports of ghostly sightings and other strange occurrences have been made by numerous patrons. Next time you're in town and need a place to stay, why not try something a little more unconventional? Who knows? Maybe you'll be able to find out for yourself if the Queen Mary is actually as haunted as people say it is. The Winchester House is a location of strange and curious circumstance. Owned by Sarah Winchester, the widow of firearm magnate William Winchester, the house is located in San Jose, California. After her husband's death from tuberculosis in 1881, Sarah inherited more than $20 million, which is the equivalent to $543 million today. She also received nearly 50% ownership of the Winchester Company. After her daughter died of a mysterious illness shortly after her husband, Sarah had been told by a medium that she needed to head west and continuously build a house for all the spirits who had fallen victim to the Winchester rifles. Since she didn't hire an architect, Sarah simply added on room after room in haphazard fashions to an old farmhouse, giving the entire house a haunted appearance, despite the lack of evidence of ghosts. Sarah stated having such rooms were an effort to confuse the spirits that inhabit the house, and why she slept in a different room each night, to avoid being caught. Today, the home is owned by the Winchester Investments. Throughout the following years, tours of the house have been held off and on. Maybe the next time you're in San Jose, you might be lucky enough to catch a glimpse inside the house that is said to hold thousands of spirits. Located on 2032nd Street in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts, lies the infamous Borden residence. Owned by Andrew Borden, Lizzie Borden's father, they lived in the house from 1874 to 1892. During the late morning on August 4th, 1892, the unthinkable happened. Andrew and his wife Abby had both been gruesomely murdered. During this incident, the only other two people in the house at the time was a maid by the name of Bridget and Andrew's daughter Lizzie. Bridget had been ruled out as a suspect by investigators, which turned all eyes onto Lizzie. She had disdain for her stepmother, and her shifting alibis did little to help her case. During the investigation, a hatchet was discovered in the home cellar, prompting Lizzie to be charged with the murders. However, there was no conclusive proof she had used the hatchet, and an eyewitness testimony who spotted Lizzie burning the dress she wore that day was not enough to convince the jury. Lizzie Borden had been acquitted, and the murders have been left officially unsolved. The house is currently open to the public as a bed and breakfast. Who knows? Maybe you can go there and find out the truth for yourself. Located 30 miles outside of New York City, lies one of the most famous haunted houses in the world, the Amityville House. On November 13, 1974, the house was the scene of a disturbing mass murder. Using a rifle, a man by the name of Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family while they were sleeping, which included his 2 parents and 4 siblings. He had been arrested and convicted in 1975. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, as well as their 3 children, moved into the house. After only living there for 28 days, the Lutzes left the house, claiming to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomena. After collecting around 45 hours of tape recordings, a man by the name of Jay Anson took to writing the Amityville Horror book. While this story has been the target of many critics and naysayers, I like to believe at least some of the accounts in the book are true. Since then, in 2010, the house had been put up for auction at a staggering $1.15 million and sold in August of that year. To this very day, the Amityville House is still regarded as one of the most haunted locations in the US. Ghosts have become so ingrained in today's culture, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who hasn't heard of at least one ghost story. While many places throughout the world have countless haunted locations, these are but a fraction of that number. Have any of you ever visited one of these places on the list before? Or perhaps you've stayed at a haunted location that wasn't on this list. Have you ever had a paranormal encounter before? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember, be careful out there. The world can be a scary place.